Welcome back to World of Immersion. Today we're going to be ranking every single ride at Universal Studios Hollywood in 2024, including the brand new Mario Kart Bowser's Challenge that just opened this past year. So be sure to stay tuned. Before we start today's video though, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss when we have brand new content. We have tons of new content coming out in 2024. With that being said though, let's get right into the video. Alright, so starting off, we're going to talk about the last place ride, and that is going to be Silly Swirly Fun ride, coming in at number 12. This should be no surprise to anybody. This is the one and only flat ride in the park, and really there's not much to this ride. It's mostly just for kids. There's really not much to talk about here. Sometimes though, on crowded days, it can get a little bit of a busy line, but other than that, it's not that popular, and it's just really meant for the kids. It's not bad because it's only meant for kids, but definitely nothing to talk about. Next, coming in at number 11 is a ride that I really don't do very much because it's not really my favorite, and honestly it's barely even a ride in my opinion, and that is Kung Fu Panda Adventure. This is a 4D motion simulator type of ride where you're sitting in a giant theater, and don't get me wrong, the effects are really cool. However, I just prefer rides where you're going around through physical sets rather than sitting in the same place just watching one giant screen. The pre-show though, however, is really cool, and I do like the queue a bit. I just wish they would replace this with some actual dark ride. It's near the front of the park, so sometimes it can get a pretty busy line. But this ride does have really good capacity because of how big the theater is. But yeah, that's why it comes in at number 11. Moving on at number 10, we have another ride that I don't really like very much, and that is Despicable Me Minion Mayhem. In general, I'm really not a huge fan of motion simulator rides. You'll notice that most of the motion simulators in the park are towards the bottom of this list. I really just prefer those physical sets. And Minion Mayhem is one of those same rides that is just, you're sitting in one spot surrounded by a giant screen. This one moves a lot more than Kung Fu Panda Adventure does, and that's why I prefer it. Plus the queue and the few pre-shows that it has, I believe they have 2 pre-shows, is actually pretty cool. The ride itself though is just really just watching a movie, and I don't like those type of rides. So that's why it comes in at number 10. However, it's still a great ride for kids. And at number 9, we have the first roller coaster on this list, that is Flight of the Hippogriff. This is the one and only outdoor roller coaster in the park. Not for long though, however, because the new Fast and Furious roller coaster will be opening soon. And this ride is not bad at all. It's really good for kids. It's super smooth. The queue is decently well themed. And honestly, I'm a really big fan of this ride for what it is. Definitely, this is the way to do a kiddie coaster. Now, obviously, I wish they had more coasters in the park. I wish this was not the only outdoor family coaster. However, it's still a really good coaster. And like I said, the theming is really nice. Moving on to number 8, we have the Simpsons Ride. Now, once again, I don't like motion simulators. However, this, in my opinion, is the best of the motion simulators. It definitely feels like it moves the most. However, it has been quite a while since I've done this ride, and I know that the effects have really been seeming out of date, and the screens look like they might need some adjusting. This is one of the rides that if you watch my predictions video, I predicted this ride closes pretty soon, because I really feel like it's starting to get outdated. However, it still seems to get one of the longest lines in the park, but that's mostly due to the really poor operations it has, with the lines moving super slow. Definitely this is one that if you want to do, you gotta hit it early, because otherwise you're going to be stuck waiting in a long line that barely moves. Now moving on to number 7, this is where we get into the pretty good rides. Honestly, all of these rides on 7 and above are rides that I try to hit on every single visit to the park. And coming in at number 7 is going to be Transformers The Ride. Now this ride, while it does utilize mostly screens, it does have some physical sets, and it moves a lot more. It's actually a tracked ride rather than a motion simulator. And I think that the theming of this ride is pretty good. In my opinion though, unlike some of the other dark rides on this list, it really feels like you're kind of just watching the action take place. You're not really in the action. It's like you're watching a bunch of robots. Obviously it's Transformers. You're watching them all fight each other. There's not really any stakes because it doesn't feel like you're involved very much. This ride is really cool though, don't get me wrong, and it's definitely a solid attraction in the park, and it seems to get some of the longest lines in the park as well. Do be warned though, this ride seems to go down quite a bit, so try to hit it in the morning if you can before it starts to go down later in the day. Now coming in at number 6, this may be a shock to a lot of people. It's going to be Secret Life of Pets Off the Leash. Now while this ride is made for kids, it definitely is a much better dark ride in my opinion than Transformers and some of the other rides on this list. This ride utilizes pretty much solely physical sets, and it feels like one of those classic Disney dark rides that's all focused on physical sets. There are so many animatronics on this ride. Everywhere you look, there are animatronics completely surrounding you 360 degrees. And the sets in this ride are so massive. It's a really fun ride. I wish that the capacity was a little bit better. I feel like they could probably implement some extra ride vehicles in between the ones that they currently have. But like I said, it's still a really good ride, and definitely would recommend checking this one out. However, do be warned, this one also gets a really long line and it moves very slow. Moving on to the top 5, at number 5 we have one of a lot of people's favorite rides in the park, and this is Revenge of the Mummy. This is the one and only thrill roller coaster in the park, and this ride is really fun. The only reason it comes in so low on this list is because, one, it is a short ride, and two, I really feel like the theming is just not there. Starting off with talking about how it's a short ride, it really is just the launch. You go through a few turns, you got the very, very short backward section, and then the ride is over. I wish there was something in that finale room too, maybe even just theming. It doesn't have to be more coaster elements, but something that kind of wraps up the ride. It feels like it ends very abruptly. But the launch is really fun, and I like the theming before the launch as well. During the ride, the theming's okay, but it's a pretty decent ride, don't get me wrong, and it's definitely going to be really popular amongst the general public because it's a roller coaster and it's pretty thrilling. Moving on to number 4, we have the most famous ride in the entire park, and that is the world famous Studio Tour. Now, it's really hard to rank this because it's barely even a ride. You go through the studio on a tram, and you do go through some ride scenes, so that's why I consider it a ride. And plus, you're sitting down. While it is driven, it's still a ride in my opinion because you go through the motion simulator sections. If you've never been to Universal Studios Hollywood, this may be your favorite thing in the park. It's almost a 45-minute long experience. You get to go through all of the back lot and the front lot. It's really, really cool. You get to go through some other effects too. You get to go through the giant King Kong room and the Fast and Furious Supercharge, as well as see Jaws and the Flood. It is really cool. It's definitely going to be the highlight of most people's visits to Universal Studios Hollywood. However, in my opinion, there are some rides that are just a little bit better. And moving on to number 3 is the newest ride in the park, and that is Mario Kart Bowser's Challenge. Now, a lot of people I feel like were disappointed when this ride opened. However, in my opinion, I think it is really, really good. It combines screens and physical sets to the best of its abilities, in my opinion, and it's a really, really cool ride. It's got some of the best physical sets, and while you are wearing those augmented reality glasses, which put some more stuff into the physical sets alone are really cool. Now, don't go in expecting a fast ride. This is not a fast ride at all. However, it's a really well-themed ride. It has one of the best queues, if not even the best queue, out of any ride at Universal Studios. This one also gets a very long line because it is the new ride in the park. However, it's a really fun ride, and honestly, the capacity is pretty good too, so that line will move really fast. Moving on to number 2 is one of the best dark rides on the planet, in my opinion, and that is Harry Potter and the Forbidden Journey. Now, recently, I just rerode this ride a few days ago, and it reminded me just how amazing this ride is. While it does utilize screens a lot, the physical sets on this ride are incredible and has one of the coolest ride systems out of any ride in the world. Additionally, the queue is probably the most themed queue at Universal, probably only second to Mario Kart. It's such a cool ride though, and it's a really long ride as well. The capacity is amazing on this ride too, so the line moves very fast. And just overall, it is one of the most perfect rides. I've been on this ride so many times, I feel like I don't appreciate it enough. Definitely if you're going to Universal Studios Hollywood for the first time, make sure you hit this ride because it's going to be a real crowd pleaser. It's such a fun ride. And finally, the number 1 pick. This is my personal favorite ride at Universal Studios Hollywood, and it has been for a long time since it opened, and that is Jurassic World The Ride. I actually prefer Jurassic World The Ride to when it was back as Jurassic Park. I think it is much better now, and it has by far the coolest animatronics out of any ride at Universal Studios Hollywood. That finale scene with the T-Rex and the Indominus Rex battling is so incredible. The Indominus Rex may be the coolest animatronic I've ever seen in my life, as well as the most terrifying. That thing is huge. It's also a very long ride, and it combines thrill and theming so perfectly. That final drop is really, really fun. And just overall, it's a fantastic ride. I'd say the only complaint with this ride is the queue is pretty much just one giant cattle pen. There's not much theming in it. But other than that, there's really no issues with this ride. It's such an incredible ride, and be sure to hit Jurassic World when you're going to Universal Studios Hollywood. You will not be disappointed. But that's going to do it for our ranking today of every single ride at Universal Studios Hollywood in 2024. Be sure to comment down below how you would rank these rides, as well as if you've never been before, what ride you would be most excited to go to. Thank you so much for watching World of Immersion today. Be sure to stay tuned for all of our new videos in 2024, and we will catch you in the next one.